Hello and welcome to India Explained. This is the channel where we take on anything and everything, and you guessed it, explain it simply. Today we are diving deep into a massive $60 billion trade shock that's hitting the Indian economy right now. If you're ready to get the real story, do me a favor real quick, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. It really helps us keep explaining more.
Okay, so let's get right into it. A trade bombshell has just been dropped on India, and we're not talking about a small tremor here. We're talking about a massive challenge that could affect everyone from an artisan weaving a carpet in a tiny village all the way up to the country's entire GDP growth. This is a potential earthquake for India's export landscape.
At the very heart of this crisis is this one number, 50%. The United States has just slapped a sudden, pretty severe punitive tariff on a whole range of Indian goods. Now, the official reason given is that it's a penalty for India's foreign policy choices, especially its ongoing trade with Russia. So just like that, a diplomatic disagreement has been turned into a massive economic weapon.
And that, of course, raises a huge question. When you have a tariff this big, one that's affecting an estimated $60 billion worth of exports, what does that actually mean for the businesses, for the people on the ground? Which sectors are suddenly staring down the barrel of a gun?
To really understand the impact, we first have to look at who exactly is being targeted. See, this isn't just a blanket tariff hitting every single thing that India sells. The US has been incredibly strategic about this, creating a very clear list of winners and losers. And believe me, that targeting tells its own story.
And just looking at this list, the strategy becomes crystal clear, doesn't it? On one side, you have these incredibly labor-intensive sectors. Think textiles, gems and jewelry, seafood, all getting hit hard. And these are massive, massive employers in India. On the other side, well, you have sectors that are critical to US supply chains, like pharmaceuticals and electronics. They're exempt. This whole thing is designed to inflict maximum pain on India while causing minimal disruption for the US.
Let's just zoom in on one of these for a second. Textiles. This is the second largest employer in all of India, right after agriculture. We are talking about over $10 billion in exports to the US every year that are now just suddenly at risk of becoming completely uncompetitive. The scale of this is it's immense.
And this chart, this is where you see the brutal reality of those numbers. You take the existing duties, you add this new tariff, and the effective rate on Indian textiles skyrockets to nearly 64%. Now compare that to competitors like Bangladesh or Vietnam, who are sitting pretty at around 20%. If you're a buyer for a big US company, the choice all of a sudden becomes painfully obvious.
And that data, that's not just an abstract number. It immediately translates into devastating, real-world consequences. We're talking about huge retailers like Walmart and Target probably looking to cancel massive orders. We're talking about millions of jobs just hanging in the balance, and entire manufacturing hubs like Tirupur facing nothing short of an existential crisis.
And it's a very similar story for another powerhouse sector, gems and jewelry. The industry's own export council is forecasting a potential 75% decline in exports to their single most important market. This is a direct, serious threat to the diamond polishing centers in Surat and the jewelry manufacturers in Mumbai.
So, when you have multiple massive sectors all in crisis at the exact same time, the damage doesn't just stay contained in those areas. Oh no, it creates this huge ripple effect that spreads right across the entire national economy. So what does this actually do to the country's overall economic health? Well, economists have already jumped in and revised India's GDP growth forecast downwards by as much as 1.2 percentage points. For a national economy, that is a really significant hit to growth.
But beyond all the abstract percentages, this is really about people. The hardest hit sectors are just dominated by small and medium-sized businesses, the MSMEs, which are truly the backbone of Indian employment. This means millions of jobs are now vulnerable, and that threatens widespread economic and social distress.
And there's another consequence, another domino to fall. See, exports to the US are a major source of dollar earnings for India. A sharp fall in those exports means fewer dollars coming into the country, which in turn puts some serious downward pressure on the value of the Indian rupee.
So, faced with this pretty complex, multi-layered crisis, how is India responding? Well, the government has decided to move beyond just a simple reaction. They've put together a really comprehensive strategic playbook.
The first, and maybe the most important decision, was about what not to do.
It would have been easy to just slap retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods and start a messy tit-for-tat trade war. Instead, India has opted for a much more measured, multi-pronged strategy that's focused on long-term stability.
This official statement really captures the diplomatic tone perfectly. The message is crystal clear. Despite this really painful action from the U.S., India is choosing to treat this as a temporary issue that needs to be resolved within their bigger strategic partnership, not as the start of an all-out economic war.
So what does this multi-pronged strategy actually look like on the ground? Well, it's essentially built on three core pillars: ongoing diplomacy, immediate support for the domestic economy, and a really aggressive push to diversify export markets for the future.
So, on the diplomatic front, while communication channels are staying open, those crucial free trade agreement talks have been put on ice. At the same time, India is holding firm on its non-negotiables, its red lines, especially when it comes to protecting vital sectors like agriculture and dairy from foreign competition.
Internally, the government is moving fast to cushion the blow. This includes things like financial aid for struggling exporters, a big push to boost domestic consumption of made-in-India products, and fast-tracking tax reforms to make goods cheaper and hopefully encourage more spending.
And finally, we have the forward-looking pillar. India is launching a massive push to find new customers. We're talking about targeting 40 key markets and fast-tracking trade deals with partners like the UK and the EU. The goal here is simple: reduce reliance on any single market, and build a much more resilient export economy for the long haul.
So, after looking at the shock, the damage, and the response, what's the final takeaway here? What do we learn from this whole episode of pretty unprecedented trade turbulence?
The core story, when you boil it all down, is that a truly formidable external challenge is being met not with a knee-jerk retaliatory reaction, but with a calculated long-term strategy. The focus is all on building domestic strength and global resilience, rather than getting sucked into a damaging trade war.
And that leaves us with one final and, I think, fascinating question for the future. Could this crisis, as painful as it clearly is, actually be the very thing that permanently accelerates India's economic pivot? A pivot away from being over-reliant on traditional partners and towards a future that's built more on self-reliance and a much more diversified global footprint. Only time is going to tell on that one. Thank you so much for watching this explainer on India Explained. What are your thoughts on that final question? I'd love to know. Drop them in the comments below. And hey, don't forget to check out our other videos where we explain more complex topics simply. We'll see you in the next one.